Chapter 6, Fresh Meat. After being picked up by my mom at Jack Juvenile Assessment Center, I made a short court appearance and got into a juvenile drug pretrial intervention program. I've been in plenty of those now, thank God. This consisted of weekly classes that I had to show up to and pee in a cup. You would think these programs would prevent juveniles' exposure to drugs and other illegal unsafe behaviors, but it did quite the opposite. In the program with me were other young people who had been doing far worse things than I was. Some of them were addicted to meth, crack, or were heavy Xanax users. Being exposed to this crowd only increased my desire to be a menace to society. I thought I had to be the most thugged out person in the room. Although my mom protested, I always showed up in baggy clothes and sagging pants. Being around a crowd like that also had another effect on me. It exposed me to methods of getting high that wouldn't show up on a drug test. But before probation, I was only drinking, smoking weed and cigarettes, occasionally taking Xanax. Now with most of these options were futile, I had to turn to other methods. Spice, which I had only sold previously, became a regular drug of choice for me during this period. If you don't know what Spice is, God has blessed you. Since also referred to as K2, is an ambiguous term that doesn't mean anything inherently. Spice could refer to a range of chemicals from research chemicals to bathroom cleaner, and they were sprayed on Damiana and other leaves and smoked by users. Because of its ambiguous chemical nature, it was a very unpredictable drug to take. Sometimes it was mildly pleasant, other times it would take me into a really deep, dark places where I would talk to evil entities on other planes of reality or have terrible visions of death, decay, dismay. It was really a crazy, scary thing. One time my poor mom called me while I was on it. I don't remember much of the experience. It was like I was possessed, and I may have been. I must have said something crazy. She went out to the common places I hung around to find me and discovered me zombie walking on the side of 4th Street South. When she approached, I had no idea who she was and began talking about all kinds of nonsense. Startled and scared by this, she took me to the hospital where I cooled off for a bit. Another drug I began to take around this time was DXM, dextromethorphan, the active ingredient in Robitussin and many other cough medicines, which has been the joy and downfall of many curious adolescents. One day while standing around at Williams Park, a homeless man approached me with a set of keys and a moped and offered me $50 for it, like to purchase the stolen moped. Although I figured it was stolen, I bought it from him anyways because it seemed like a fun thing to have. Later in the day, I linked up with my friend John Signhorse, and we went on an absolute joyride. Zipping through the streets of St. Petersburg on probation, we ran through pharmacy after pharmacy, galloping through the cough medicine aisles, clearing the shelves of DXM bottles and triple C's into my backpack. What a sight to see. The two of us barred out, giggling, because I still ended up taking bars and everything. I barely passed those drug tests, and it is crazy. I have failed the probation so many times they'd have to arrest me, bring me back. So it has got even worse when I was an adult. What a sight. The two of us barred out, giggling and dashing with armfuls of over-the-counter drugs must have been. The odd thing is that most of the stores we went to, nobody did anything. But how much could a human being working late nights for minimum wage at a pharmacy be bothered by two rampaging tits? Because of how disorienting the drug is, you wouldn't think DXM and shoplifting would be the ideal combo. But the more we took, the slipperier we became. Eventually, at one CVS, we were finally stopped by a clerk. She's a heavier set woman in her 50s. "Hey, put those back and leave or I'll call the cops," she said. John and I looked at each other and back her. "No, fuck that," I said as we both ran out to the moped, got to our getaway. Wind whipping through our hair as we zoomed deeper into the suburbs. Over the course of the day, I took over 120 DXM gel caps, which is 240 milligrams of DXM, which depending on the brand is about 6 bottles of pills. Isaac Newton's theory of gravity applies to more than just objects in space and time. Everything that goes up comes down. At one point, way after midnight, on the brick road to historic Old Northeast, all the posh suburban homes began to blur into the ambiguous blob as a chemical battered conscience slipped into blackness of ignorance. Even when it hasn't seemed like it, grace has followed me. After all of that, I somehow managed to wake up the next morning at my dad's condo, alive with all of my limbs and free from trouble. Looking back, mesmerized I got home safely makes absolutely no sense to me. Yeah, dude, driving that moped and completely going unconscious but still waking up at home. So it's crazy. From the moment I went on probation, my behavior became wilder and wilder, putting more and more strain on my relationship with my parents, making it harder to live in their households. To avoid the tension, I started living oftentimes at Mac and Daryl's place on and off. I am eternally grateful that Daryl and Mac and his family took me in as their own. In that small hood quadplex already with 5 people, they made room for one more. My time in that area shared with Mac, his brothers Terrence, Daryl, and Sean, and his mother Marjorie is filled with fond memories, as are the people I lived with. Before I met Mark, had been a crack addict, and that's not my business to say that since I used their names. I have to change that. And I'm going to say it. Before I met Mark, had been a crack addict and prostitute, and she used to beat her children senselessly. But by the time I landed on her couch, she had transformed into a sweet old woman. Most times I saw her, she was sitting around smoking weed and talking about Jesus. Her sons had their own share of trouble. Daryl had been arrested for straight up murking someone. Mac had done time for drug trafficking and firearm possession. Sean wasn't even around when I first stayed there because he was doing an 8-year sentence for armed robbery. Despite all of them being convicted felons, the family was full of some of the kindest people I knew in my youth. I was amazed by how much they loved and respected me despite their rough backgrounds. We spent countless hours together in that place, smoking back-to-back mids blunts, playing Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, and freestyling. Those brothers could really tear it up. They were all masterful freestylers, pouring their souls and their pain and their hard lives in prison, etc., into their verses. One night when we sat around, the brothers began talking about the hardships they faced in the system and on the streets. They spoke about the difficulty of getting out of the game once you start trapping. Daryl got serious and talked about what it was like to shoot somebody. Terrence described the haunting orchestra of crying, groaning, pacing feet, clanging metal that makes sleeping in prison almost impossible. Then Marjorie, lying on the couch with a blunt in her hand, spoke up. Yeah, I mean, this is a true story, so I'm just going to tell it.